Tariffs are about making America rich again and making America great again, and it's happening, and it will happen rather quickly.
Workers at a Georgia Hyundai plant describe a chaotic scene after an immigration raid at the facility. Federal authorities say Thursday's raid was the result of a months-long investigation by several agencies.
Foreign car makers like Hyundai and BMW to be opposed to imports.
What if I told you that the American dream of bringing jobs back has just turned into its biggest nightmare? That the very foreign automaker once celebrated for investing billions in the U.S. is now considering walking away on September 17, 2025. Hyundai, the South Korean giant that turned Alabama and Georgia into global manufacturing hubs, stands on the edge of retreat. And if Hyundai leaves, the shockwaves won't just rattle one state. They could trigger the collapse of America's auto market. For years, Hyundai was held up as proof that America could still attract world-class investment. Its factories in Montgomery, Alabama, and West Point, Georgia, provided tens of thousands of direct and indirect jobs. State officials proudly pointed to Hyundai's $5.5 billion electric vehicle battery plant as a cornerstone of America's clean energy future. Yet what was once hailed as a triumph of globalization is now unraveling into a cautionary tale of how unstable policies, sudden raids, and punishing tariffs can destroy everything overnight. The first cracks appeared in Georgia. Workers at Hyundai's battery expansion plant described scenes of chaos after a massive federal immigration raid swept through the facility. On May 14, 2025, more than 200 federal agents stormed the site, detaining 475 workers. Homeland Security later confirmed it was the largest single-site immigration raid in U.S. history. Many of those detained were on legal short-term visas, but barred by technicalities from working in industrial roles. To Washington, it was law enforcement. To Hyundai, it was a wrecking ball. Overnight, the construction floor went silent. Contractors froze operations. Schedules collapsed. Suppliers scrambled to recover losses. Local officials expressed alarm. Georgia's Labor Commissioner Bruce Thompson warned, "You cannot simply remove nearly 500 specialized workers from a billion-dollar project and expect it to keep moving. The economic ripple effect is devastating." He estimated that the raid alone would delay the plant's opening by at least 14 months and erase more than 8,000 projected local jobs tied to construction, suppliers, and logistics. Beyond the commissioner's warning, the stories from the ground were even more heartbreaking. Workers who thought they had built stable lives suddenly faced an uncertain future. Jose Martinez, a welder at the site, told local reporters his family was terrified of losing their home. "I came here legally on a temporary visa, paid every tax, and worked overtime to give my children a better life. Now they are asking if we will have to move in with relatives," he said. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, raids in the auto sector this summer alone wiped out more than 12,000 jobs nationwide, disrupting projects worth billions. West Point's Mayor Steve Trammell warned the town could lose nearly 40% of its tax revenue if Hyundai's expansion stalls, threatening school funding and local services. Small business owners echoed the alarm. A trucking company operator explained he had invested in 10 new trucks to serve Hyundai's facility. "Those rigs are just sitting in my yard while I keep paying the bank." This raid didn't just stop construction, it stopped my livelihood. Their voices painted a grim picture of a policy decision cascading into economic collapse. On the ground, small businesses felt the pain immediately. Joanne Fields, who owns a diner just 2 miles from the Hyundai site, said her lunch crowd plummeted from 180 workers per day to fewer than 40. "I had to lay off 3 waitresses. This was supposed to be our town's big break. Now it feels like the rug's been pulled out from under us." Her story is repeated across West Point and Montgomery, where motels, trucking firms, and parts suppliers have seen contracts canceled and invoices unpaid. But the immigration raid was just one front in Hyundai's American nightmare. The second and far deadlier came from tariffs. In the second quarter of 2025, Hyundai reported profits plunging 21.4% year over year, directly tied to Donald Trump's 25% tariff on imported auto parts. Hyundai had long relied on cross-border supply chains, moving components between South Korea, Mexico, and the U.S. under the framework of USMCA. With tariffs now slamming those imports, costs soared. Analysts at IHS Markit calculated that the average Hyundai vehicle assembled in the U.S. now carried an extra $3,000 to $6,000 in parts costs. Consumers immediately felt the impact. In July 2025, Hyundai dealers across the South reported that sticker prices on popular models like the Tucson and Sonata were up nearly $5,200 on average compared to just a year earlier. Middle-class families who once turned to Hyundai as the affordable alternative began walking away. A survey by Edmunds found that 62% of potential Hyundai buyers in August delayed or canceled their purchase due to price hikes. Dealerships turned into graveyards of unsold inventory. One Montgomery dealer told Bloomberg, "We've got rows of cars sitting untouched. People come in, they test drive, but as soon as we talk financing, they walk out. The math doesn't work anymore." Nationally, Hyundai's U.S. sales in August dropped 27% year over year, their steepest monthly decline since the 2008 financial crisis. The irony is bitter. Policies sold as protecting Made in America are suffocating the very industries they were meant to safeguard. "This is economic suicide," said Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia. "We begged Hyundai to come here with the promise of stability. Now Washington has changed the rules mid-game, and our communities are paying the price. Across Alabama and Georgia, the human toll is visible. Line workers face reduced hours. Truck drivers lose contracts. Parts suppliers sit idle." According to the Economic Policy Institute, more than 18,000 jobs in the Southeast have already been lost or frozen due to Hyundai's slowdown. The damage extends beyond workers. State budgets that counted on tax revenue from Hyundai's expansion now face deficits. Local schools in Troup County, Georgia, projected $12 million less in annual funding tied to Hyundai payroll taxes. Meanwhile, investors are losing patience. In Seoul, Hyundai's boardrooms are openly modeling alternatives. Sources close to the company told the Financial Times that Vietnam and India are being considered as new production hubs. Both countries offer cheaper labor, more predictable policy environments, and governments eager to provide subsidies. Why endure endless losses in the U.S., one executive reportedly asked, when others offer stability at half the cost? The symbolism cuts deeper than the numbers. For decades, America marketed itself as the gold standard destination for advanced manufacturing. Now Hyundai, once one of its biggest foreign success stories, is treating it as expendable. Investors worldwide are watching. If Hyundai pulls out, who follows Toyota, BMW, Kia? A chain reaction could redefine where the world builds its future cars. Already, warning signs are everywhere. Asian automakers across the board are bleeding under U.S. tariffs. Nissan reported North American operating losses of $440 million in Q2 2025, while Toyota admitted tariffs added $1.8 billion in extra costs to its U.S. operations this year. What began as targeted tariffs has ballooned into a systemic crisis, disrupting supply chains that took decades to build. For American consumers, the fallout is relentless. Each disruption layer adds hundreds or thousands of dollars to the cost of a new vehicle. The National Automobile Dealers Association estimates that average new car prices in the U.S. will rise 12% by the end of 2025 solely due to tariffs and supply chain distortions. Families delay purchases, dealerships sit on unsold stock, and one of America's cornerstone industries, the auto market, is losing momentum. Local politicians, usually eager to cheer foreign investment, are now sounding alarms. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey warned, "We can't afford to lose Hyundai. If they go, it won't just be Alabama. It will be a signal to every investor that America can no longer be trusted." Georgia Senator John Ossoff added, "This is not about one company. This is about the credibility of the United States as a place to do business." The labor paradox is perhaps the cruelest twist. Factories across the U.S. are desperate for workers, yet immigration crackdowns have severed the only pipeline that could keep assembly lines running. In July, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce warned that restrictive visa enforcement had cost American manufacturers $9.4 billion in delayed projects this year alone. "We're not protecting jobs," said Chamber President Suzanne Clark. "We're destroying them." The clean energy sector is one of the biggest casualties. Hyundai's $5.5 billion EV battery project in Georgia was supposed to anchor the EV transition to electric mobility. Now it sits stalled. According to the International Energy Agency, America's EV adoption targets could fall 27% short by 2030 if current investment delays persist. Meanwhile, China is racing ahead, securing dominance in EV production. Inside Hyundai's U.S. plants, morale has collapsed. Workers whisper about shutdowns. Community leaders fear a slow exodus as suppliers quietly scale back. One pastor in West Point described it bluntly. "When Hyundai came, it felt like hope. If they leave, it'll feel like betrayal." And the financial markets are noticing. Hyundai's U.S. listed ADR shares have fallen 32% since January, wiping out nearly $18 billion in market value. Investors are spooked not only by tariffs and raids, but by America's unpredictability. As one Morgan Stanley analyst put it, "You cannot plan billion-dollar factories in a country where the rules change overnight." The broader lesson is haunting. Washington promised a revival of American industry. Instead, it has boxed itself into stalemate by choking off labor, punishing imports, and destabilizing investors. The U.S. is eroding the very foundation of its manufacturing base, and every dollar that leaves U.S. soil doesn't just weaken America, it strengthens its rivals. So the question is stark. If Hyundai is the first to leave, who comes next? Could BMW or Mercedes, already struggling under tariffs, follow suit? Could Toyota redirect billions toward Mexico or Asia instead? Could America's so-called industrial heartland become a hollow shell, dotted with abandoned factories and broken promises? For now, Hyundai has not officially announced an exit, but its boardroom discussions are real, and the signals are unmistakable. In Montgomery and West Point, where Hyundai was once a source of pride, fear now dominates. And across the auto market, one truth is becoming clear. The policies meant to make America great again may instead be driving it into an industrial graveyard.
And then it's tariff, because tariffs are going to make us rich as hell. It's going to bring our country's businesses back.
To see how these tariffs will impact Japan and Americans buying cars.
What if I told you that the very heartbeat of America's auto industry, the factories of Detroit, has fallen silent, not because of foreign competition or consumer disinterest, but because 5 of Asia's biggest automakers have decided to pack their bags and leave on September 17, 2025.
Short term, we have to brace for the impact. We'll work hard to find a way to go overcome these incremental costs.
The reality is undeniable. More than 38,000 American workers have lost their jobs this year alone, as production lines grind to a halt and assembly plants shutter across the Midwest. Families who once relied on steady paychecks from Toyota, Nissan, Hyundai, Subaru, and Mazda are now staring at foreclosure notices and mounting credit card debt. Local restaurants, diners, and auto parts shops that depended on factory wages are closing their doors. Detroit, the Motor City once crowned as the capital of the global car industry, is watching its legacy crumble. And while American consumers are left scrambling to afford vehicles that now cost thousands more, Canada is quietly emerging as the new powerhouse, absorbing the very investments America has pushed away. For decades, Toyota was the undisputed champion of foreign automakers in the United States. By 2020, it was the top-selling foreign brand in America, synonymous with reliability, fuel efficiency, and affordable family transportation. Yet by 2025, this titan finds itself cornered by the brutal weight of tariffs. Trump's 25% tariff wall has inflicted projected losses of nearly $19 billion in a single fiscal year, an amount that erases years of growth in one devastating stroke. The company's ambitious plan to dominate the electric vehicle revolution in North America has been throttled. Supply chains that once moved seamlessly across Japan, Mexico, and the U.S. are now snarled by shipping delays, tariff penalties, and skyrocketing steel and battery costs. Dealers on the ground say they've never seen anything like it. "We used to move 40 new Camrys a month," said Alex Martinez, owner of a family-run Toyota dealership in Ohio. "Now I'm lucky if I sell 5. Customers walk in, see the sticker price, and walk straight back out." Indeed, new car prices have jumped between $5,000 and $10,000 on average. Even longtime loyalists are defecting to the used market, where decade-old Toyotas are suddenly fetching record highs. A senior analyst at Edmunds confirmed last week that U.S. Toyota market share has already slipped by nearly 12% since January. And with production moving to Ontario and Quebec, Canadian plants are humming with the very jobs that once kept American families secure. If Toyota's decline represents the erosion of dominance, Nissan's story illustrates outright collapse. Inside the company, North America was once referred to as the Golden Land, a market of guaranteed long-term profits, yet today, it has turned into a nightmare. By the end of fiscal 2025, Nissan recorded a staggering $5.3 billion loss in the United States alone, the largest in its corporate history. This isn't just a bad quarter, it's a structural implosion that threatens the survival of its North American operations. Production of iconic models like the Pathfinder, Murano, and Frontier has already been halted for the Canadian market, severing a pipeline that once defined the brand's regional identity. In Mexico, where Nissan exported more than 320,000 vehicles annually to the United States, operations now hang by a thread. Workers in Aguascalientes told Reuters that shifts have been cut in half, and rumors of a plant closure grow louder each week. Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan addressed the crisis bluntly in a press conference 2 days ago. "We are watching decades of industrial progress unravel. Nissan is no longer leaving by choice. It is being forced out by policies that punish American workers while rewarding our competitors to the north." Her warning comes as the United Auto Workers Union confirms that more than 6,000 of its members tied to Nissan supply contracts in Michigan and Tennessee have already been laid off. The retreat of Nissan is no longer hypothetical. It is a visible wound bleeding across communities that once believed they were safe. Hyundai's downfall is a story of a double crisis. On paper, tariffs alone were enough to squeeze the South Korean giant. In the second quarter of 2025, Hyundai reported losses of $66 million, with operating profit plunging 16%. A sharp reversal for a brand that just 2 years ago was celebrated as one of the fastest-growing challengers in the U.S. market. But economics was only half the blow. At its flagship plant in Georgia, federal immigration raids in May led to the arrest of 475 Korean workers, many of them technicians critical to the company's electric vehicle program. Overnight, production schedules collapsed. Projects tied to Hyundai's highly anticipated EVs SUV were thrown into limbo. The 8,500 new American jobs promised by Hyundai evaporated in a single week. Local small businesses were left devastated. "My diner used to serve 200 Hyundai workers on lunch breaks," said Joanne Fields, a restaurant owner in West Point, Georgia. "Now it's down to 30 a day. I've had to lay off 3 waitresses." In Seoul, the raids escalated into a diplomatic firestorm. South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol accused Washington of weaponizing immigration enforcement to cover economic failures. What began as a factory issue quickly evolved into an international rift, proving that tariffs don't just cut profits, they fracture alliances. For Subaru, the U.S. market wasn't just a priority, it was the entire backbone of the company's global strategy. More than 70% of Subaru's worldwide sales came from American consumers. For years, that dependence looked like a winning formula. By 2022, Subaru had carved out a unique niche among middle-class families, selling itself as the practical, safe, and affordable choice. But 2025 has flipped that advantage into a crushing liability. With tariffs driving up prices, Subaru now projects losses of $2.5 billion in fiscal 2026, an existential hit for a company of its size. Loyal buyers are walking away. "We always drove Subarus. Our Outback lasted us 12 years, said Melissa Green, a teacher from Wisconsin. But now the new models cost nearly $8,000 more. We can't afford that on 2 salaries. Analysts at Kelley Blue Book confirm her experience, noting Subaru's average transaction price has risen 23% since the tariff war began. Unlike Toyota or Nissan, Subaru has few alternatives. It doesn't have major operations in Europe or Southeast Asia to offset U.S. losses. Its brand identity is so tightly tied to American families that diversification is not an immediate option. In effect, Subaru is trapped, cornered between collapsing demand, soaring costs, and an absence of escape routes. Mazda's fate underscores a chilling reality. No company is too small to escape the fallout. Long regarded as a niche brand with a loyal customer base, Mazda once seemed modest enough to avoid the worst of tariff chaos. But by mid-2025, that illusion shattered. Exports from Mexico to the U.S., a vital artery for Mazda's supply chain, collapsed by 54% in just 4 months. Plants designed to feed the American market stood idle, their output locked behind tariff walls. Mazda tried pivoting production toward Canada, but even that offered little relief as costs continued to balloon. Meanwhile, Chinese electric vehicle makers seized the opportunity. BYD and NIO have begun flooding global markets with EVs priced 20 to 30% cheaper than Mazda's lineup, further eroding its margins. Mazda is now in survival mode, explained auto analyst Daniel Ives in a Bloomberg interview last week. They're fighting a two-front war, tariffs on one side and Chinese competition on the other. For a company once admired for its stylish, driver-focused cars, the prospect of obscurity has never felt so real. But while the automakers struggle, the deepest scars are etched on American families. Walking into a dealership in September 2025 feels like stepping into an alternate reality. Price tags that once required years of careful savings now soar out of reach. New vehicles cost between $5,000 and $10,000 more than a year ago, even for models built domestically. According to the National Automobile Dealers Association, the average new car price in the U.S. now exceeds $49,500, the highest in history. Financing has only added fuel to the fire, with lenders recalibrating for higher sticker prices. Monthly payments have ballooned. Experian reports the average car loan now sits at $754 a month, up nearly 30% from 2023 for middle-class households. That's the difference between stability and financial strain. Families are being pushed into the used car market, but even that refuge is collapsing under demand. 10-year-old sedans now sell for thousands above Blue Book value, while practical SUVs vanish from lots within days. I tried to buy a 2014 Ford Escape last month, said Marcus Williams, a warehouse worker from Indiana. The dealer wanted 18 grand for it. That's insane. It's got 120,000 miles. What was once a fallback option has turned into its own nightmare of scarcity and inflated costs. The collapse of factories ripples beyond workers to entire towns. In Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky, shuttered plants have left diners, grocery stores, and schools without a tax base. Economists estimate that for every auto job lost, another 2.7 jobs vanish in supporting industries, from suppliers to retail. That means the 38,000 direct layoffs this year translate to nearly 100,000 total jobs erased across the Midwest. It's a hollowing out we haven't seen since the Great Recession, said University of Michigan economist Betsy Stevenson. In Detroit, the once bustling Jefferson North Assembly Plant sits quiet, a symbol of broken promises. Empty parking lots and idle assembly lines now haunt communities that were told tariffs would bring jobs home. Yet while America falters, Canada is stepping into the vacuum. Ottawa has positioned itself as the new magnet for foreign capital and auto investment. In just 9 months of 2025, Canada has secured commitments worth $12.4 billion from Asian automakers. Toyota is expanding its Cambridge plant. Nissan is scouting Ontario for EV battery facilities, and Hyundai is pouring resources into Quebec's emerging electric corridor. Canadian officials are openly celebrating. These investments represent not just jobs, but a generational shift in our industrial base, said François-Philippe Champagne, Canada's Minister of Industry. In a statement last week, local SMEs are thriving. Tool and die shops in Ontario report 40% growth in contracts tied to new auto projects. Meanwhile, used suppliers across the border are shutting down. The contrast couldn't be starker. Factories north of Lake Erie roar with new investment, while Detroit is left with boarded-up storefronts. The final warning is as unsettling as it is urgent. If the auto industry, the pride of American manufacturing, can collapse under the weight of tariffs, what sector will be next? Already, agricultural exporters are nervous. Soybean farmers in Iowa say Canadian trade officials are courting their buyers in Asia. Tech executives warn that semiconductor supply chains are shifting to Europe and Canada to escape U.S. policy uncertainty. Energy analysts point out that Canada now supplies over 60% of U.S. aluminum and 97% of its imported oil, resources that Ottawa could redirect if relations sour further. The lesson is clear. Protectionism meant to safeguard American workers has instead left them paying more for less, while allies and competitors reap the benefits. The car, once the symbol of U.S. middle-class independence, is fast becoming a luxury item reserved for the few, and if foreign manufacturers no longer see the United States as a safe harbor, then America's dominance in tech, energy, and agriculture could be the next domino to fall.